Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of SciChat. And of course, I say this every week, but SciChat is really two things rolled into one big awesome thing. The first thing is what you're listening to, which is a weekly recorded webinar. So every week I record a data-based webinar about a specific marketing topic. That marketing topic changes every week. This week we're talking about please retweet specifically, but social calls to action more generally. But then, of course, the other part of SciChat is a Facebook group, a community of more than 1,300 scientifically grounded marketers. That is, marketers, communications, PR professionals, small business owners that do marketing for their own business who are interested in becoming better at their jobs, marketing and communication roles, through applying the scientific method. Through applying things like data experimentation and research and going myth busting, looking for unicorns and rainbows, superstitions and myths to bust in the way they do their marketing. And this week's topic is in fact one of my favorite superstitions to approach. And what's most interesting about the superstition is how different it is in different forms of marketing. Meaning, if you talk to a social marketer, or excuse me, if you talk to any form of marketer other than a social marketer, and you ask them, okay, I'm gonna buy an ad, I'm gonna send an email, I'm gonna have a phone call, I'm gonna send a direct mail piece, I'm gonna have a billboard, I'm gonna do anything, and I'm interested. I want to drive sales. I want to make my bottom line better. What is the most important thing? Generally, what you're going to hear is that you're going to need a call to action. Right. In fact, I have a lot of marketer friends on Facebook, and I've seen fly through my Facebook feed, somebody take a picture of a newspaper ad or a billboard or something along these lines with no call to action. Right? And that's silly, because if you're spending time and effort and sometimes money on getting something in front of your prospects, your subscribers, or people who've never heard of you, you need to give them something specific to do. And no marketer worth their salt would ever bat an eye at the concept of calls to action in marketing in general, right? But then suddenly, when we went to Twitter and to social media, calls to action became uncool, right? Which is super weird. I don't exactly understand why that's true, but it is. And so this week we're going to focus on one specific example of this, which is the phrase, please retweet. And then I have some other things to back it up, but those are just sort of ancillary points. I really want to focus on this one because I think this is the clearest example of a superstition about social calls to action and how it's very, very, very wrong. Now, if you go and ask, if you have a few, a couple thousand or whatever Twitter followers, and you go and ask them, especially if you're like a marketing person, and you go and ask them, if I said please retweet, would you retweet it? A lot of them are going to say, no, I would never retweet something that says please retweet. I'm so much cooler than that. That's beneath me. That sort of thing doesn't work on me. Right? Now, what that is when you ask somebody what they do, how they do it, why they do it, typically they're not going to give you answers that are necessarily true. They're not trying to lie to you. It's an effect that's been studied and surveyed for a long time, that people answer questions like that in a way that either A, they think you want to hear, or B, in a way that they want to be true. Right? So if you ask somebody, would you respond to a blatant call to action like please retweet, a lot of people are going to say, no, I'm not that easily manipulated. It has nothing to do with your call to action that I'm going to retweet it. It has only to do with the content or, my relationship with you or whatever their other explanation is. And some people will say, well, I might have even retweeted it before you put in please retweet. But then after you put please retweet in, I'm not going to do that because I'm not that person. But the actual data shows that please retweet, in fact, works. So what I did is I grabbed tens of thousands of randomly occurring tweets, like just random selection of tweets, both retweeted and not. And I broke them into three buckets. One bucket was tweets that contain the phrase, please retweet. Another bucket was tweets that contain the phrase, please RT. And then the third bucket was tweets that contained neither one of those two calls to action. In that third bucket, which was the largest bucket, right, it's tweets that did not contain the phrases, please retweet or please RT, that neither, bar on the bottom of this slide here, about 12% of them were retweeted, like got one retweet or more. But then when you look at the ones that contain the phrase, please RT, almost 40% of those were retweeted, got one or more retweets. And then when you go up to the one that says, please retweet, these are tweets that contain the phrase, please retweet, 51% of them were retweeted. Now, there is some I don't want to say confusion, but compounding, relationship between causation and correlation here that we have to be aware of, right? If I am a marketer worth anything, I'm not going to put the phrase "please retweet" on a tweet that's super unretweetable, right? So there, of course, is some correlation and causation here, and this does not imply causation, but it does imply a correlation. And as Edward Tufte said, correlation is not causation, but it sure is a hint. So if you would anecdotally go and do this kind of research, go your Twitter stream, post a link or a video or something interesting image one day, and then a couple of days later post the same thing, put please RT on it and see what happens. Please retweet on it, see what happens. Or if you've never used those kind of phrases, just go throughout your day, throw them in every once in a while, and then go over to my website, retweetlab.com, and run your account. Down the bottom of the graph, down the bottom of the page, you're going to see a graph that shows you, most of your tweets, 99% of your tweets don't contain a call to action like please retweet, but the ones that do get a lot more retweets is typically what you're going to see. Right. Now, I think this works in two ways. One, it's a call to action, and social call to actions work. If somebody's following you, they're following you because they like you, they like your content, and so it kind of makes sense if you ask them to do something, especially politely with the word please, then they're likely to do it. The other way it works, and I think this is the way that it works even on people who don't want to believe that explicit calls to action like this work for them, is that merely saying the word retweet forms a sort of implicit call to action, meaning if I'm flipping through Twitter, I may not have the notion of retweeting hot on my mind, right? I may just be reading. In fact, if I have several columns and I'm reading through my columns are based on topical interests. When I'm reading that column, that topical interest is probably what's going to be top of my mind, and I'm not thinking about, oh, I can retweet this. But the simple occurrence of the word retweet reminds me, this is a gentle reminder, that hey, that's a thing I can do. And before I can retweet anything, I have to remember that that's an activity that I can do. Now, I'm not saying that people forget that retweet's a thing until you say please retweet, but just sort of implicitly bringing it up to mind. So you even would see a similar effect with this graph with just tweets that said a retweet in them, RT, right? So there's a great sort of implicit and explicit call to action power working there. And then, so that last graph was a binary got retweeted or not, like a yes or no kind of thing. This one actually shows you the amount of retweets. Now, most tweets, don't get any retweets, of course, except for in the please retweet bucket. And then the vast majority of those only get one. And then there's a really sort of long tail to it. So the graph, I typically present it in that binary format just because it's easier to understand. In black and white, it works. But then I'll also show you this. Basically, of the average number of retweets per tweet for that neither call to action bucket, which is down at the bottom here in this graph again, is 4.2. Now that's a mean, right? That doesn't mean that every one gets 4.2. It's the average is 4.2, right? Because again, only 12% were retweeted at all. And so if you average all that out for the entire set, it's 4.2. But when you jump up to the top one, which is please retweet, that bucket of tweets that contain that phrase, you see the average jumps to almost 21 retweets per tweet. So not only are they more likely to be retweeted when you use that call to action, but they are actually more likely to get more retweets per tweet, right? So if you create a retweetable tweet already and you don't use the call to action, then you're probably going to get some retweets. But there is some evidence to suggest that you may be able to get more retweets than you would have gotten otherwise if you use the call to action. Right? Because again, those implicit and explicit sorts of calls to action there. Now, another example of both the implicit and explicit call to action, I really wanted to focus on that please retweet thing because I think it's the most sort of bald-faced example of how silly that superstition against social calls to action is. But then when you look at blog posts, and you look at the word comment, if the word comment occurs in a blog post, those blog posts tend to get more comments. So what you see here is the orange bars represent blog posts that had the word comment in them, and the gray bars represent blog posts that did not have the word comment in them. The zero line right in the middle there is the average number of whatever the vertical thing is. So in the first pair of graphs, or first pair of bars, it's the average number of comments that posts on that specific blog had gotten. And then the graph represents the difference from that average for posts that had the word comment in it, posts that did not have the word comment. And then the second pair of bars here is the average number of the difference from the average number of links that post got, from the average post on that blog. And then the third one, of course, is views, right? So the difference from the average number of views that post got compared to the average number of views for posts on that blog. it's a little complicated, but once you kind of wrap your head around it, you understand what I'm saying. So basically, when you use the word comment in a blog post, those blog posts tend to get more comments than blog posts that do not use the word comment. It's simple. And I'm not even saying here, please comment. You're just saying the word comment. And so a lot of these are going to be the call to action, the explicit, please comment below if you think this, comment below to tell me what you think, that kind of thing. But then additionally, you're just saying comment. The word comment reminds people, oh yeah, commenting is a thing I can do. And it's not like that light bulb obvious, but it is a pretty subtle but powerful effect. When it's sort of like playing chess, right? And so I like to play fast chess online sometimes. You play 3-minute games, and when you're playing 3-minute games, sometimes when you and your opponent are contesting over a hotly contested square on the board or area or a certain kind of combination of pieces, you kind of get this tunnel vision because there's not a whole lot of time to scan around the rest of the board. So what can happen is sometimes movement there can open up opportunities elsewhere, meaning, I may make a move that would allow my opponent to capture one of my pieces that I don't want him to capture, but I don't notice it. But then if he moves something in that area, then my mind gets drawn to that, right? And so it's not like this, like, hey, look over here, but it's like sort of subtle, just reminding me that that area of the world exists. So in this case, again, you use the word comment in the blog post, I'm going to think about commenting, and then the word link in blog posts. Blog posts that have the word link in them get a lot more links than blog posts that don't have the word link in them. It seems really silly on the face of it, how obvious it is, but then think about how absurd it is, how vehement the opposition to the use of social calls to action is, because it really, really is. And I even bet you that some of you folks listening are a little uncomfortable about this idea. Because we've been told as social media marketers that we can't, you can't do the old school stuff. Don't be a used car salesman, all that kind of thing. Social calls to action work. Don't be afraid of them. When you look at Instagram, right, the top most liked Instagram hashtags are stuff like follow for follow and like for like. Again, social calls to action. These are reciprocity indicating social calls to action, meaning I'm not just saying please retweet. I'm saying something along the lines of please retweet and then I'll retweet you. But in Instagram terms, it's like this image and then I'll like your image back. So it's a little, it's incentivized, and the quality of the interaction may not be huge. But the point is, the call to action works on Instagram as well. So on Twitter it works, on blogs it works, on Instagram it works. And then when you look at Facebook, posts on Facebook pages that have the word like in them get a lot more likes than the average post on those walls, those pages. Again, silly, but it works. And this is not only just like below to like if you like this, or like if you agreed, share if you disagree, that kind of stuff, because it's going to include some of that, but a lot of it's just going to be saying the word like, because the word like is used in conversation a decent amount, especially by the Facebook crowd, which, well, the Facebook crowd's really everybody, but you get my point. And then again, the word comment. Posts that include the word comment get more comments than posts that don't use the word comment. Simple and duh, but imagine how absurd this indicates that the vehement opposition to social calls to action is. And then the word share. Blog or Facebook posts that have the word share in them get more shares than Facebook posts that don't have the word share in them. So if you ever had any doubt that calls to action like please retweet, please follow even. And one of my favorite things is, and I'm not going to name names necessarily because there's too many names to name here, but there's a lot of social media experts that will tell you not to use stuff like please retweet, right? But then you go to their site and you'll find a please follow me button, which is the same thing, right? And so if you ever had any doubt that social calls to action work on Facebook, work on blogging, work on Twitter, work on the visual content networks like Instagram, they do. They 100% do. And you need to incentivize them sometimes, use more explicit versus more implicit calls to action, but they absolutely work. And this is not to say that they're the end all be all of social marketing. And it's not to say that your audience is always going to react the same way that my large data sets do. But this is to say you should not be afraid to experiment with them, because there is a wealth of opportunity here for you to experiment with. This is one of the topics that I'm most passionate about in social media, is the idea that social calls to action, while in certain super cool kids circles are unpopular, they're extremely, extremely powerful. So that is this week's edition of, well, the recorded video portion of SciChat. Of course, the Facebook group is always open, and we look forward to talking to you there, and I look forward to speaking to you again next week. Bye-bye, everybody.